Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation on the response to our readings from week 1. So, from our readings this week, the main theme that I gathered was the idea of establishing an identity. And something that was really interesting to me about all of these readings were that each one was unique in its own way. For example, the first 3 readings, is there such thing as Latino identity, what it means to be Latino, and Latinos in the new millennium, were all essays written by different people, and they kind of put their own perspective on things. And in the last reading, it focused on constructing an identity and the different obstacles that occurred along the way for Latinos and Hispanics. So, from these readings, I definitely learned a lot of information that I didn't know before and deepened my knowledge on a bunch of different things. Something that I think stood out to me the most was the idea that our identity is fluid and it's not fixed. Meaning that your identity is something that develops over time. It's not just something that takes a day or is assigned to you at birth. The reading, Is There Such Thing as Latino Identity, puts it as you establish your identity from birth to death. And it really stood out to me because your identity is not just your ethnicity. And it's not just your heritage. It could also include how you carry yourself as a person and different characteristics about you. With that said, something else that was really important from these readings is that everyone's identity is unique and their own. And from this, it includes culture, it can also include language, and other things. Something else that was really interesting that I didn't know was that Hispanic is not typically used in Spanish-speaking countries. I found this really interesting because I never really thought of it that way. Learning Spanish throughout high school and in college, they would refer to people in Spanish-speaking countries as Hispanic. But I never really thought of it as people not using that term in the countries and using more Latino, Latina. Something else that was really interesting that I never realized before was the fact that Hispanic is associated more with data and analysis, while the term Latino is more commonly used in communities. Lastly, from the Census 2000, Latinos are the largest minority group in the United States. I found that very crucial because, as you can see from this next slide, at the time this essay was written, 35.3 million people were classified as Hispanic, and it's still growing exponentially. After doing further research, I found out that approximately 65 million people in the US are classified as Hispanic. This is huge because in our readings, the essay was talking about people in the world. And looking at it, that population doubled almost. Something else that was interesting was the fact that 50% of the Hispanic population in the late 1940s lived below the poverty line, which created a huge disadvantage to accessing education. And lastly, something that I learned was that 97% of first-generation immigrants identify as Hispanic. This was definitely very eye-opening, especially with what's been going on in our world today. Lastly, here are the references, and I can't wait to learn more about the history of Latinos and Latinas, as well as learning more about constructing an identity